Okay, so here I am in the bathtub with a kitty, thank you, and there is my paper that you can hardly see. Yeah, thank you for going out of focus. There we go, in focus. That is a half sheet of Arch's watercolor paper sitting in my bathtub. Now, it's been in there for, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to leave it a little while longer. I tend to put a sheet or two into the bathtub and then I'll forget all about it. And it seems to be, oops, that's not working, sorry. And it seems to work out because I have the best results actually when, can you see how it's starting to see a little bit see-through up there closer to the plug? You can kind of see through it. The longer I leave, oh, that's weird. The longer I leave the watercolor paper in the tub, the more it stretches the fibers and the better stretch I get. Okay, so I'll be back and I'll show you what I do in the meantime. Okay, so this is what I do in the meantime while I wait for the watercolor to stretch, is I set up my stretching area. I've got, this is pre-ripped pieces of butcher tape or watercolor tape. It's gummed on this side, but it absolutely is not strong enough to hold. Okay, so I've got my glue here. This is just regular white glue. It's regular school glue. You can use carpenter's glue, archival glues, wood glues. They're all pretty good for sticking down the tape. And then I've got my staple gun. Okay, standard, what is this? 5/16? I'm not even sure. It's that size. Okay, so I just get this all set up while I'm waiting. And next up, we're gonna stretch a piece of paper. Oh yeah, and I forgot to show you the board. This is a 3/4 inch piece of plywood board. It's got a nice surface, but it's actually just particle board on the inside. Oh, with cat hair. Welcome to my house. Okay, it's not very good quality board, but the surface is nice and smooth, and I sealed it with gloss matte medium. You can spray seal it or use matte medium or gloss medium, acrylic medium. You can paint it as well. You just want to seal the surface so it's no longer an absorbent wood surface. Okay, so I took my paper out of the tub and you can see it's pretty see-through right here. Now keep in mind that good quality papers are cotton rag, not paper pulp. So sticking them into the tub is not going to hurt them at all, not in the least. Okay, they're cotton fibers and the fibers will stretch, and this is okay. Okay, these I have miscalculated. These are not long enough to actually, well, one is, I think. Nope, these are not long enough. Those are. Okay, so I have to remeasure. I didn't realize how long this was. And I'm gonna actually have this wrap around the board, so that's okay. And then I just take another one and measure it out. Okay, so hopefully these are long enough now. And I've dropped one on the ground. Okay. So what I'm going to do is glue the back of this I'm going to glue the back of all of these tapes, and I'm going to stick them down onto the board. So I've thinned my glue down with a little bit of water, and I'm just covering this. I'm going to add a little bit of water to it as I go because there is some glue on this. It's just really not sticky enough to hold it down. I find whenever I've tried to use just the watercolor tape without adding glue to it, the staples, the paper pulls away from the staples, which makes a really bad stretch. Okay? So now I'm going to put this down halfway over the tape and halfway over the watercolor. Oops, that's a little far. Okay, there. So this method of stretching wastes a lot of the paper, and there's just no getting around it. It's just what happens. Oops. And I'm wrapping this. I'm going to, once this dries, completely cover this whole area with masking tape. I'm going to go over top of the staples and everything. Okay, and I'm really just pressing this down as well as I can. Okay, these are all folded up weird on the sides. That's okay, we don't care. Okay. I'm going on the other side. And I'm going to do the same on this side. And I'm going to do the same on all four sides. So I'm gluing, adding a little bit of water when it seems a little bit too sticky. Adding glue. And if you're wondering, when I took the paper out of the tub, I let it drip dry for a bit, like I shook it out and let it drip, and that's enough. Like, it doesn't, obviously you don't want it to be dry, but it doesn't have to be soaking wet. I carry it from the bathroom into my studio, so I don't want it to drip all over on the floor. So I just let it drip and shake it a bit until the excess drips off. Now I have long hair and I have cats, and always one or the other will get onto a board that I'm stretching. I've got cat hair here, and I took a piece of my own hair off the back earlier, and I try to not touch the paper when it's wet. I think of watercolor paper in this state as being kind of bruisable, and I just don't touch it. See, there's some schmutz here. I'm just going to leave it. If that's not a problem, when it dries, this will just wipe right off. Okay? So I would have preferred to have more wood here, but such is life. It's never perfect, right? But it's good enough. Good enough works for me just fine. Okay, I'm getting glue all over the table. That's stupid. And see what I've done to the table. This used to be beautiful, but I guess your studio equipment gets used, right? And lived in. Okay, so okay, that's, see my little arches there? not so hot. I don't really like to paint over the watermark. It's kind of crappy, but oh well. There it is. I don't know if you can tell, but this is clearly not a fully square tape job on my part. So when I go to tape the masking tape, when this is dry tomorrow, I'm going to attempt to square off the page more. I'll do what I can. Okay, last side. And once again, I've mixed up too much glue, which I do every time. But it's just white glue, but in my head I'm thinking, is there anything I can glue? What can I glue? I don't like to waste. Okay. It's not as off square as I thought. Okay. Now, part of the reason that you want to really push this down is to be aware of where the edge of your watercolor paper is. Okay, because I'm going to start stapling. Where did my stapler go? There it is. I'm going to load my stapler up. And I'm going to start to staple. Now, this is loud and annoying. So it's probably going to be unpleasant for you and for my tenant in the basement. Sorry, Doris. Okay. This is how much room I've got that has paper over the watercolor, that has tape over the watercolor paper. So I want to staple right in the middle. Okay? Through the paper and the tape. Okay? And I'm going to staple every 2 inches or so. Okay? So I lean my hand on it and snap it. Because if you don't, the force of it will fly up and you'll have a crappy staple. Okay, the reason you tape this down with the watercolor tape is because if you just tape directly on the watercolor paper, it's going to shrink. Okay, as it dries, it shrinks and it'll pull away from the staples to the point where it actually won't be stapled anymore. It'll just be like a hole where the staple was, and then your watercolor paper will just no longer be stretched and it'll suck. Okay, so this watercolor tape keeps the staples and the paper in place. This is old school and it takes a bit of time, but if you want to do any really wet pouring washes in watercolor, this is really one of the few ways to do it. Now, I have been experimenting with gluing boards, watercolor boards, and papers onto solid supports with some success. However, they've just been really small. Isn't it nice that I'm talking through this so you can't fast forward this obnoxious loud stapling noise? Thank you, Leslie. I'm a jerk. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to be experimenting with some larger pieces quite soon and gluing them using archival glue and obviously waterproof glue onto solid wooden supports. in larger sizes, and then using those boards to do pouring washes and whatnot. So we'll see what happens. I'm just worried about the edges, because the way this works, and you'll see it when I come back tomorrow, is I will masking tape over this entire thing so that you've basically got a masking tape plastic coverage over it, so you can pour and it can drip and it can slide over top, and there's never water going back underneath the paper. And that's what I'm not sure will happen with the watercolor paper glued onto wooden supports. But we'll see. It's all an experiment. And honestly, if that works, I will be so excited, because you can buy watercolor paper in a roll that's 44 inches wide by like 10 yards. So you can do giant sized watercolor pieces taped onto boards and not have to stretch it. Okay, here's a tip which I failed to do. When you want to close your stapler, you have to actually depress it and throw a staple out. Or I guess you could empty it. But normally what I do is I will pay attention to what I'm doing instead of talking to you. And I will, in the last staple that I do, hold it down and close it. Okay, instead of shooting it off into the ether. What are these bugs? Go, go, go. Okay, so that is as much as I will do right now. Normally, I will stretch 3 or 4 sheets at a time, because you do it, you have everything out, you get set up, you might as well do a bunch at once. And then that's hot, because then you've got one ready. But I'm just doing this one. I'm done for the night. I'm going to leave this probably in a closet or up high somewhere, because if I don't, my cats will actually just lie right on this, because they lie on everything. Okay, and then I will be back tomorrow to show you the masking tape finish. Okay, but can you see how flat this is? This will remain flat. It'll be perfectly flat. And the most awesome thing is if you can saturate this entire thing with water, just pour water all over it and then pour paint across it, and it won't ripple at all. It's awesome. Okay, so it's the next day, and ta-da! It's all dry and perfectly smooth and amazing. And now I'm going to tape it off. So, I've got 2-inch masking tape. Now I recommend that you use 3M. There are like no-name brand masking tapes out there, but this is going to be getting wet, very wet, and I find 3M gives me the best results for wetness. So you want to overlap the brown craft watercolor tape by at least 1/4 inch. Okay, I don't want to go over it too much because I don't want to waste too much of the paper. Okay, but I want to make sure that I've covered the seam or the edge of the watercolor tape. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to wrap that, and I'm going to do another strip halfway. That will wrap around the back, because I'm going to be using this to pour, pour watercolor right across the board and across the paper, and it's going to flow like right over, and I don't want it to come underneath the watercolor tape. So I want to make sure it's taped right over there. Okay. Oops. Okay, so that's right over the edge of it and wrapping right around. Okay, that's going to ensure that I can pour water and watercolor right over this and nothing's going to seep in underneath the watercolor tape or underneath the paper itself. Okay, so I'm going to finish taping this and then I'll give you a final shot and that'll be that. Okay, so here we have it. It's finished. I ended up just doing 2 strips. I did 3 over here, the one that I showed you, and it was not necessary. So I did 1 strip along here and then a secondary strip down the back here to cover over the edge. And then that's it, and it's ready to be poured on. Okay, so thanks for watching. Go and stretch some paper. Bye.